Hello and welcome to Air Quality Permits, understanding what they are and how to get one. This module is brought to you by the Environmental Compliance Assistance Program, which is part of the Energy and Environment Cabinet. Air quality permits are required by the Clean Air Act and serve to act as a single document that contains all of the relevant information for a permitted facility. The purpose of the permit is to provide improvement to emission inventories and air quality planning and control. Part of the permitting program involves paying fees based on the actual amount of pollutants produced. For total emissions less than 25 tons per year, a facility must pay a fee of $150, while facilities that produce more than 25 tons per year of total emissions pay a fee based on the amount of emissions produced. Air quality permits summarize a facility's regulatory requirements, which include emission and operating limitations, along with pollution control. The permit also determines how a facility will stay in compliance with those regulatory requirements through things such as monitoring, testing, record keeping, and reporting. Permits allow for a given amount of pollution over a given period of time and are not designed as pollution prevention. Any stationary source of air pollution that creates pollutants within permitting thresholds or is a subject to a new source performance standard or national emission standards for hazardous air pollutants should be permitted. Permits can also be issued to portable sources, such as ready-mix facilities, and follow the source. A source is no longer considered portable if it has been stationary for 12 months. Mobile sources, such as cars, trucks, ships, and more are regulated under a different title of the Clean Air Act. The term source means one or more affected facilities contained within a given contiguous property line, which means the property is separated only by a public thoroughfare, stream, or other right-of-way. As you can see, almost any process or operation could be considered a source of emissions and subject to PTE calculations. Here we see a couple of other important definitions that explain the terms affected facility and air contaminant. For facilities that are large with multiple buildings or designed to have a campus setting, PTE calculations must include emission sources for the entire facility contained within that property. In this case, affected facility can also refer to an apparatus or piece of equipment. It is also important to note that Kentucky defines an air contaminant to include dust and odors. Dust and odors are one of the most common sources of violations in the state. Managing your dust and odors can be key to staying in compliance and not becoming a nuisance to neighbors. There are 3 criteria to consider when figuring out whether you have one or multiple sources. 1. Are the sources under common ownership? 2. Are they within the same industrial classification? And 3. Are they contiguous? Once you get your sources straightened out, it is time to think about how to permit them. The first step in determining how your facility should be permitted is to determine the correct permit type. First, are you a major or a minor source? That will depend on your facility's potential to emit. Let's take a detour and discuss what exactly PTE is, as it is vital to any air permit application. So what is PTE? Here is the technical definition, as stated in Chapter 52 of Section 401 of the Kentucky Administrative Regulations. The important terms are maximum capacity of a source and physical and operational design. Any control devices that are integral to the equipment are considered when determining emissions. In simplest terms, potential to emit, or PTE, is a way for an entity to numerically illustrate the air quality emissions generated. It is a facility-wide summary of all emission sources and includes criteria pollutants and hazardous air pollutants, or HAPs. There are 6 criteria pollutants and approximately 186 HAPs. PTE is the basis of any air permit application. It is the primary communication tool between the applicant and the permit reviewer. A facility-wide PTE summary helps the permit reviewer assess applicable requirements and if the entity can meet those requirements. When discussing PTE, it is important to understand that in most cases, the potential operating hours are used to calculate the amount of emissions a facility will produce during a year. This means that PTE calculations assume a facility will be operating 24/7 at maximum capacity. This is so that any changes in operating hours or production limits do not require new permits. One exception is if there is a bottleneck during the process. For example, if there is a single piece of equipment that has a lower processing rate or a set operating time that impacts the entire process. In that case, the bottleneck will be used in calculating the PTE. How do you know what to include in your PTE calculations? Look around, take a walkthrough of your facility, and try to follow the flow materials take from arrival to shipping out. What equipment and processes are used? Do you have anything that runs off natural gas? Any spray coating, welding, heavy equipment that runs off diesel? Here we see some examples of common emission points that would need to be captured on a facility's air quality permit. Here we have typical emission sources associated with painting and coating operations. Safety data sheets contain important information related to volatile organic compounds and hazardous air pollutants associated with different types of coatings, solvents, and adhesives. However, if you require more information or cannot find the applicable information on the SDS, you can contact the manufacturer for product information. Here we see some examples of activities associated with particulate matter and fugitive emissions. Fugitive particulate matter is particulate matter that has not passed through a stack before being released into the air. Fugitive dust is a kind of fugitive particulate matter that is released into the air by wind or other similar forces. Now that you know the potential air emission sources, it is time for the next stage of gathering information. Number the pieces of equipment that make emissions and get manufacturer specifications for them. You should have manufacturer specification sheets. If not, call the manufacturer or look for them on their website. Once you have the equipment, it is time to start looking at the materials. Look over the safety data sheets to determine if the materials your facility uses contain any hazardous air pollutants or volatile organic compounds. We will go through emission factors in just a minute. What is an SDS? SDS stands for Safety Data Sheet. It is a very handy document that is available for chemicals and most other industrial materials. It contains a breakdown of everything in a material and any safety concerns about that material. It also outlines proper procedure for using that material and how to deal with accidents. An SDS contains a lot of information, but two parts are especially useful for permitting purposes. The names and section numbers might vary slightly, but they will be similar to these. The first is the composition and ingredients section. Here we have an example from an SDS for spray coating. This section of the SDS will specifically list all parts as percentages of the total makeup, including HAPs and VOCs. This information can be used to help determine the emissions created by using that product. The next useful section is the physical and chemical properties section. This provides information like weight, density, and VOC amounts that will be useful in determining emissions. Emission factors are defined as a numerical representation of how much pollution is emitted per unit processed, manufactured, or utilized. They can also be expressed as an hourly rate of emissions. The provided example illustrates just how important emission factors are when determining PTE. There are two main options when trying to determine emission factors. First, your facility can calculate its own specific emission factors. Stack testing is the most accurate way. Mass balancing beginning and end products to determine actual amount used and lost. And you can also use modeling like EPA tanks program. If you cannot find specific data on equipment or common materials for your industry, try checking AP42, an online resource provided by the EPA that contains emission factors, which are the amount of pollutants released associated with a specific activity. WebFire is another online database for emission factors. Now that you have gathered all of the emission sources, it is time to figure out your facility's PTE. Remember, PTE is calculated for each pollutant. Some examples of criteria air pollutants include particulate matter, VOCs, and lead. The emissions emitted from an emission unit, or point, equals the throughput of the equipment times the potential operating hours, which is usually 8,760, times the emission factor for that pollutant. Remembering the concept of maximum capacity as a basic formula for all PTE calculations starts with the maximum hourly rate of the emission source, or emission point, multiplied by the potential operating hours, and then multiplied by an emission factor. Potential to emit calculations are based in basic math. If you can multiply and divide, you can do PTE calculations. In addition, when doing PTE calculations, always remember to follow the units. Once you have calculated your PTE for a piece of equipment, it is important to know if there are any control devices on it that would limit the pollutants released. This could be the determining factor in what permit threshold you meet, so it is extremely important. Some examples of control equipment for particulate matter include cyclones, fabric filters, and wet collectors. While these devices are effective for particulates, they are not useful for VOCs. This can be seen when dealing with operations such as paint booths. Gaseous pollutants can be controlled using condensers, absorbers, or through combustion. Now that you have calculated all of your emission sources and have an emission summary, it is time to look at the various categories of permits available. If you are lucky and your emissions are less than 2 tons per year for any single hazardous air pollutant, less than 5 tons per year for combined hazardous air pollutants, and less than 10 tons per year of regulated air pollutants, then nothing is required. However, it is a best practice to document your emissions and keep them on file in the event of an inspection. It is also a best practice to go ahead and submit a registration to get an official determination from the Division of Air Quality and confirm that your estimates are correct. Registration is required if a source's PTE is more than 2 but less than 10 tons per year of any HAP, more than 5 but less than 25 tons per year of combined HAPs, and more than 10 but less than 25 tons per year of an RAP. If the PTE falls within any of the above reference ranges, or is subject to a federal regulation, including NSPS or NESHAP, then a registration is required. A state origin permit is required if a source's PTE is less than 10 tons per year of an HAP, less than 25 tons per year of combined HAPs, and more than 25 but less than 100 tons per year of an RAP. Title V permits are required for major sources where the PTE is more than 10 tons per year of an HAP, more than 25 tons per year of combined HAPs, or more than 100 tons per year of an RAP. Prevention of Significant Deterioration, or PSD permits, are major sources above Title V thresholds, or certain industry categories with specific limits that are located in attainment areas. Some facilities can accept limits on their emissions to keep from being a Title V. These are called Federally Enforceable State Operating Permits, or FESOPs. Step 1 of determining your permit type is to identify the facility as either a minor or major source. This will be primarily determined by your calculated potential to emit, but you must also consider if your facility is subject to federal regulations. If you are a minor source, just use your PTE calculations to determine which permit type applies to your facility. If you come up as a major permit, it will be necessary to take these additional steps. Depending on your operation type, you may need to calculate your actual emissions for your PTE, for example with a welding operation. Also, this will be important if you would like to apply for a FESOP. The next step would be determining permit limits and whether you require a Title V or a PSD. This is a visual explanation of the different permitting levels in Kentucky. Registration is the lowest level, followed by state origin permits. These are both considered minor source permits. Then we have major sources, which are covered by Title V and PSD permits. We are going to spend a minute talking about the fee stop, as it is a little different from the rest of the permit types. One of the most common types of permit is a federally enforceable state operating permit, also known as a conditional major or synthetic minor. These permits are most relevant for facilities that do not operate at their potential, but whose potential emissions are considered a major source. These permits require some additional record keeping in order to document compliance with permit limits. Once you know the type of permit your facility will need, you can begin the application process. All of the required forms can be found on the Division of Air Quality webpage at the address provided on this slide, along with instructions on how to complete the forms. There are a number of forms, so if you have any questions about what might be applicable for your facility, please contact the Division of Air Quality or the Environmental Compliance Assistance Program for assistance. There will be contact information at the end of this module for both. If submitting a permit application, you will need at least the 7007 AI and the 7007 N forms. Other 7007 series forms may be applicable depending on your equipment and facility type. We will go through each of these items in a complete application. The cover letter is an important document that provides a lot of useful information regarding the facility, processes, applicable regulations, and calculations. Be sure to be as detailed as possible when describing the process and potential emission sources, to include any type of control measures or limiting factors that may apply. Permit applications require submission of the 7007 AI form and the 7007 N form at least. Here we see the 7007 AI form, which contains administrative information that is crucial in setting up your facility in the EEC database, such as addresses and contact information. Some information, such as the permit number, 21 number, and agency interest number, will not be known for new permit applications and will be provided by the Division of Air Quality. The 7007 N form will serve as a source emissions profile for the entire facility, while other 7007 series forms will be tailored to processes that are more specific. Please review all 7007 series forms to determine which might be applicable for your facility. Other important parts of a complete permit application include the facility layout and processes flowchart. The facility layout should include the location of each piece of equipment and any control devices, stacks, and vents. It is recommended to include any new equipment that has yet to be installed. All emission points, control devices, and stacks should be numbered to ensure clarity, and the flow diagram should show the path of materials from arrival at the facility through all processes until the final product's shipped out. Here is an example facility layout. As you can see, it does not need to be anything elaborate, just enough to get the general setup of the facility. And here is the example flow diagram. Note that control devices are important to include. For the application to be considered complete, facilities must show that they are authorized to operate in the Commonwealth through the Secretary of State's office. Once you've pulled up your facility on the website, if your facility is a corporation or LLC, you can just print the entire page that comes up. If your facility is a limited partnership, there is a form. Note, if you have changed your facility's name, you will need to resubmit this so the Division of Air Quality can update their records. The application must also provide information on the location of your facility. It is easiest to just get a topographic map by pulling up your facility on Google Maps and using the terrain mode. Just print out the image that is shown. Now we are going to look at some of the common issues, both during the permitting process and in meeting the requirements of permits that can result in a notice of violation. Not adding new emission points to an already existing permit. When new processes or equipment are added, the permit must be modified to reflect the additions. not performing permit-required record keeping, and failure to renew the permit at least 6 months prior to expiration. Failure to record 12-month rolling totals or meet Method 9 requirements for quantitative opacity readings. In addition, here are some other types of issues to keep an eye out for. Annual compliance certifications, ACCs, and semi-annual monitoring reports, SAMRs, cannot be missing, late, or incomplete. Facilities must notify the Division of Air Quality of any startups, shutdowns, or malfunctions of equipment. A notification must be provided at least 10 days prior to any demolition or renovation in order to stay in compliance with asbestos regulations. This is just a list of common terms you may see in air permits or when dealing with them for your future reference. This concludes today's module. The Kentucky Environmental Compliance Assistance Program hopes you have enjoyed this presentation, and we encourage you to reach out to us if any further assistance is needed, not only for your air permits, but for any other environmental issues you may need assistance with. Thank you. Have a great day.